Former President Donald Trump returns to Washington to face charges for allegedly attempting to overturn the 2020 election and block the peaceful transfer of power. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. Former U.S. President Donald Trump was arrested and formally charged on Thursday at the U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C. Trump pled not guilty to 4 charges alleging he conspired to overturn the 2020 presidential election. This is the 3rd criminal case against the former president, who also faces charges in New York and Florida. For the very latest, we turn now to Philip Crowther, who's outside the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. Philip, first, tell us about today's day in court for Trump.
A very short day in court it was for the former president. He spent just under half an hour in the courtroom inside of the courthouse. You see behind me here, we're just a very short distance here from the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. Essentially what the former president was able to do there was see the judge presiding over this hearing, put in his not guilty plea, and that was essentially it. He was on his way out of the door very quickly thereafter, and already is back in New Jersey right now, reaching his private club there. Before that, he gave himself the opportunity at the airport here in Washington to say a few words about what he had just experienced here in court. As you know, this former president likes to make these indictments, and this is the 3rd one already for him into campaign events of some kind. This time around, just a short statement from him at the airport. Here is Donald Trump.
When you look at what's happening, this is a persecution of a political opponent. This was never supposed to happen in America. This is the persecution of the person that's leading by very, very substantial numbers in the Republican primary and leading Biden by a lot. So if you can't beat him, you persecute him or you prosecute him. We can't let this happen in America. Thank you very much, everyone.
Well, this is the view from the Trump campaign, that these cases against him, these criminal cases, are political persecution and election interference. He said there that he believes he's well ahead of President Joe Biden in polls of a potential matchup in 2024. That's not the case, though. Polls are not showing a substantial lead for the former president, but he is, by a very long stretch, the favorite to get the Republican nomination. I should say a thing about what it was like here as well today, because there was no call from the former president for his supporters to arrive here en masse and protest and support him here. There were just a few dozens of Trump supporters here, and maybe a few dozens on the other side as well, celebrating his indictment. A calm day here outside of the courtroom, but one with a huge media presence.
Now, Philip, the judge set Trump's first hearing for August 28th. That's just over 3 weeks from now. Could we see a trial date being set at that point?
Well, that's certainly something that the special counsel in this case would like to see. In his press appearance after the indictment was first made public, he said that he'd like to see a speedy trial. That is, though, something that the defense lawyers for Donald Trump don't want to see, making it clear in the courtroom earlier today that they want a lot of time to look at the evidence. They want to slow this down, and they might very well be able to do so. On the 28th of August, that is the next hearing date here in Washington, D.C., in this courthouse, but the former president does not necessarily have to be here for it. He will want to defend himself, though, in court in these 3 cases, and he's got a very big logistical hurdle as well as a very big legal hurdle ahead of him, because he wants to campaign for the presidency at the same time that he believes he can defend himself in 3 criminal cases that are now ongoing. And remember this, there might be a 4th one to be added to this. A further one could be opened up in the state of Georgia in the next few weeks already. That would make 4 criminal cases that the former president would be involved in at the same time.
Thanks, Philip. That's Philip Crowther reporting from outside the federal courthouse in Washington. Well, now for more on the charges against Donald Trump, Let's bring in our panel. Joining us from Maryland is Joel Rubin. He's a former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. Also with us from Georgia is Bill Crane. He's a political analyst and columnist. Here with me in the studio, Adolfo Franco is an attorney and Republican strategist. And from Florida, Jeff Swartz is a professor of constitutional law at Cooley Law School in Western Michigan University. He's also a former prosecutor, defense attorney, and judge. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. Jeff, let me start with you. Welcome to the show. So former President Donald Trump has been formally charged in a Washington court, as we just heard, on Thursday on 4 felony counts, including that he conspired to overturn the 2020 election and on charges of obstruction. Let's listen to the prosecutor in the case, Jack Smith.
The attack on our nation's capital on January 6, 2021, was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election.
So, Jeff, what is the main thrust here of the government's case, and what are we to make of the accusation that Trump's action go beyond free speech, which is, of course, constitutionally protected?
Well, the free speech argument has been set forth by a number of surrogates for the former president. It's really kind of a red herring because he isn't charged with what he said. He's being charged with what he did. And the only introduction of his statements is really to show his knowledge and his intent, but they're not really being used as the basis of the crime. And so therefore, I think that that's kind of a red herring. As far as what the basis of this indictment is, it's very clear, it's very concise, it's very compartmentalized, and it's really just showing what happened, not what happened on January 6th, but what happened between November 3rd and January 6th. So arguments that he's being charged with what happened on January 6th are not contained within the indictment. The indictment starts out by saying that the former president has a First Amendment right of free speech, but that free speech cannot include lies that are meant and intended to interrupt governmental functions. So he's charged with interrupting governmental functions by the way he did things and by the use of and the things that were said by his co-conspirators. That's really the thrust of the indictment.
Adolfo, great to have you with us in the studio. Now, Trump's defense team, they say that the indictment is an attack on free speech. Here is one of his former attorneys, Rudy Giuliani. Let's listen to him.
What they did here is an abomination that will live in history as one of the worst violations of free speech ever in the history of a country that used to value free speech more than any country on earth. We can't say that anymore.
So what do you make of the government's case?
Oh, it's a sham, and it's probably, I think, the most disgusting, most, chilling attack on the First Amendment that I've ever seen. Obviously, it has to do with free speech. You just saw the prosecutor be a pundit. He was using lies. I know the guest here was saying it wasn't about lies. The prosecutor is saying it was a fundamental lies. Even your guest then went back to saying there were lies. This is a free speech case. I think the Supreme Court fundamentally decided this in 2012 in the Alvarez case, and that's very clear that when it comes down to free speech in terms of the First Amendment, even if there are lies, which I don't think these were lies, that this is absolutely protected speech. But to Professor's point about conspiracy and knowingly, as if you read the indictment, that he knowingly conspired and so forth, he was getting all kinds of advice from all kinds of different people. This goes to the subjective mind of Donald Trump. I was expecting some unsaleable piece of evidence in this indictment. This is exactly what we saw on in the January 6th. They could have just photocopied this. In fact, I'm sure this is all part of this concerted effort among these these prosecutors who have admitted they've all been in discussions, obviously. So this is the polls reflected in terms of there's the legal part of it, which I think is absolutely hollow. And then there's a political aspect of it, which is your report was excellent, except didn't mention that even the New York Times now recognizes in its polling that Donald Trump is even with President Biden. This must be a shock to all the other guests who are expecting the country to be indignant about this. This is not just Republicans. These are Americans who see and perceive political persecution by the entire process has gone going. By the way, lastly, it's curious how each one of these indictments come on the heels, each one of them, we won't have time on this program, of some major Hunter Biden case or some hearing on Hunter Biden. I make a forecast. The Fulton County indictment that's coming down will come on a news day that's not convenient for the Biden family. Part of the continued effort by this administration's effort to manipulate and use the system to destroy the political opponents. We've crossed the Rubicon into a banana republic.
All right, I want to move on. Joel Rubin, great to have you with us, Joel. Donald Trump is also accused of pressuring his vice president, Mike Pence, to reject the Electoral College votes on January 26th. And I should just mention that under the U.S. electoral system, voters do not directly elect the president, but vote for state electors who in turn cast their votes for the president. Now, after that little civics lesson, Pence refused to do this, of course. How important will Pence's testimony be in this case?
Well, I want to first remark about what we just heard, which is I was waiting for it. 1, 2, 3, Hunter Biden. Just like it was 1, 2, 3. What about her emails? So there it is. There's the campaign mantra. Yeah. What about him? Nothing. That's about. Although let's not forget about Mar-a-Lago and the theft of American secrets by Donald Trump. Yeah. That's already going to court. But the reality is that Mike Pence fulfilled his constitutional duty, his oath of office, and Donald Trump spent a couple of months trying to undermine that and destroy our Constitution, steal our democracy. And take away Americans' future because the American people voted for Joe Biden. And that's the core of all of this, which is that what we have is a person in Donald Trump who cannot accept defeat and tried to do everything possible to steal the legitimate result of an election. That is a legal process. There is an election that is governed by rules and laws. And that's what he violated. And that's why this prosecution is going forward. And yes, you bet what we saw on January 6th was an abomination. And yes, you bet that should be the template for this prosecution because that was a violation of the law that he helped to orchestrate and organize. It's not a free speech thing. You don't get free speech by shouting fire in a crowded movie theater and having people run out, trample, and kill themselves when you know it was a lie. That's what Donald Trump did to our democracy, and he has to pay the penalty.
Joel, what do you make of Republicans who say that what this is simply a political gambit by Democrats to block President Trump's bid for re-election? And if we look at the consequences of some of this, I mean, you know, the president has had multiple indictments served on him right now, but they appear to be working in his favor, actually. Every time he's indicted, he extends his lead for the nomination.
Yeah, that's right. No political strategist in the Democratic Party, if they wanted to get rid of Donald Trump, would say indict him. The more he's indicted, the more popular he is amongst his base. And look at Jack Smith. Does he look like a political strategist? No. There is nothing political about this. This is purely the prosecutors, independent, the attorney general, independently. If anything, Democrats, partisans, were very frustrated that for about two and a half years, nothing was done about January 6th. Basically, half the country was looking at January 6th and saying, my God, our democracy was nearly torched by Donald Trump, and there's no rule of law coming down on his head. Well, now finally there is. This is not a democratic operation. This is the justice system at work.
Jeff, the former Attorney General in the Trump administration, Bill Barr, he said that Trump knew that he had lost the election. Let's listen to Bill Barr.
To me, it's amazing that you read through the indictment and his behavior in that indictment, and it's nauseating. It's despicable behavior. Whether it's criminal or not, someone who engaged in that kind of bullying about a process that is fundamental to our system and to our self-government shouldn't be anywhere near the Oval Office.
So, Jeff, when Bill Barr says Trump knew he lost the election, why is that important? I mean, and how do you prove what's in someone's head?
Well, it really isn't as important as you would think. He was really commenting on the fact that one of the defenses that are going to be put up is what's known as mistake of fact. And the idea that Mr. Trump reasonably believed that he had won the election. That really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If what he did was self-help because he didn't like what 62 judges told him, or Mr. Barr and everybody else around him told him, then that's conscious denial of the true facts that were being presented to him. And therefore, he has no right to self-help, to go out and commit crimes to try to make up for what he thinks is a wrong. That's not what we do. And so therefore, Mr. Barr was just trying to make the point that he had no reason to believe that he had won the election because he had been told by so many people.
Right.
So his belief was not reasonable.
Okay, Bill Crane, good to see you, Bill. Now, as we heard from our reporter, President Trump is also likely to face charges. These will be state charges in the state of Georgia. What are those charges and how serious are they for him?
Well, they're not as serious as federal charges, but they're going to mirror a lot of what work has just come out in the 45-page indictment on the federal level. The cases are similar. They're looking at the interference, particularly in the state of Georgia. The federal case looks at 6 different states where Donald Trump reached out to local elected officials, governors, secretaries of state, heads of the legislatures in an attempt to call special sessions, to gain illegal access to voting machines and equipment. There was discussions at the White House, we heard from the January 6th Commission, to use the National Guard to seize voting equipment, to inspect it, to examine it. And we also heard during the congressional testimony in the January 6th Commission from Mark Meadows and some of the White House aides that Donald Trump privately admitted that he knew he'd lost the election, that he knew that this was basically about attempting to overturn a result, but that he realized that he did not legally win the election. And I think that is a critical piece of information, both for the case that's being built in Washington, D.C., and what I believe will be additional indictments from Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis next week. I will say the timing doesn't look good, and if I were advising the Biden White House, I would have done this earlier. They're not going to get this to trial probably until well into 2024. And it does help Donald Trump in the Republican primary, but it makes him unelectable in the general election.
Right.
This is not the White House.
He got it right. He got it right when he said the White House.
Not the White House.
Just a couple minutes, Joel. Here, it's my turn, I think, in terms of on this.
The Attorney General.
A couple of things, Joel, on this is Joel was lamenting. Why did we wait 2.5 years? Isn't that curious? We waited 2.5 years because let me quote President Biden. November 7th. Donald Trump announced he had a major announcement in a couple of days to make. This was in 2022, by the way. And 2 days later, the President of the United States, Joe Biden, said, these are his words, we need to ensure that he does not take power again by legitimate efforts of our Constitution, that he does not become the next president. Not the election, not the American people. This is Joe Biden's words that I'm reading on here. So why did they wait 2.5 years, and why they waited 1 year beforehand? Your guest was absolutely right. This was an absolutely timed political persecution to begin now. Now, you mentioned the polls and Joel's amending saying, no Republican, no Democrats, no Democrat strategy, no, all Democrats are bringing these charges. Why wait around?
I'll get you, Joel, 1 moment.
Why wait around and so forth is because, yes, he's showing okay on the polls, but your report excellently prevented this. There are actually civil cases Donald Trump is facing as well. So this man's going to be bogged down with significant legal cases, 5 or 6 cases during the course of the next year when he's running for president. Of course this is timed. Why do you think the polls show what they show? Why, not just among Republicans, among independents as well. Lastly, on this issue about subjectivity in his mind, this is absolutely what was in his mind, which is wholly subjective. What are the criminal acts? I haven't seen any criminal acts when they talk about using
So you
every
obviously
opportunity
didn't
to
read the
contest
indictment.
and elect. Yes, I've read an accusation, and all of you on the show have.
Then you haven't
have
read the
taken,
indictment, Adolfo.
no, but
because
you
do this all the time.
you
The two times I've been with
view
you've
the
done same.
indictment. You view the indictment as fact.
What
I read
criminal
it as a
act?
That's
lawyer.
fact. The indictment.
As a
You know, if
criminal
anybody read the
defense lawyer,
indictment,
you have never tried a
when you
criminal
read the
case.
indictment,
Don't know what
Joe,
you're talking about.
when you read
You
the
haven't got the
indictment,
foggiest idea what you're talking
his line is, you don't know what you're talking about when you disagree with him. You know, since you have a professor, let's have Jonathan Turley on here as well.
Yeah.
Does he know what he's talking about?
right.
Here's
Turley, no.
Oh yeah, right. Turley's a little more renowned, I think. Here's the bottom line on this is, the president and his consistent, President Trump, throughout this process, saying continually that he lost the election. He's been consistent. He believes it and was given advice to that effect.
All right, I need to get to Joel. Joel, go ahead.
Yeah, no, look, let's play it straight here. Conspiracy theories are not what should govern how the American people view these indictments. These indictments are happening because crimes were committed. These indictments are occurring because grand juries support them, grand juries of American citizens. So whatever kind of conspiracy theory, organizing, you know, have at it. Bottom line is, if Donald Trump hadn't stolen classified material and brought it to his bathrooms in Mar-a-Lago, or if he hadn't been engaged in sexual assault in New York, or if he hadn't been organizing a coup against the American Constitution, he would not be getting indicted.
Okay. I want to get to Jeff. Jeff, you wanted to say something.
Well, I just think that what you have to look at very simply is that the allegations and the complaints set forth criminal acts. That's very clear. And that's why the statutes that were used were actually alleged. And the fact that he stopped his indictment at January 6th, he did not set forth what happened on January 6th is important. I don't believe, you know, that I think that the other guest probably misspoke. The White House has had nothing to do with this indictment. In fact, the department, don't laugh, Adolfo, because you don't know what you're talking about.
You know,
I get real tired of that. I really do.
I get real tired of somebody. I really do. I really get tired of somebody who doesn't know what he's talking about either. When you say that White House,
well, then,
why do you speak for the other guests?
Okay, I need.
Why are you speaking for the other guests?
I'm not speaking for the other guests.
Let Jeff finish what you were saying.
I'm making a point here.
Yeah,
okay, stop dominating the airways and let other people speak. You just try to run the clock.
No, I don't run the clock.
Go ahead, Jeff.
You do.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay. The White House appears to have nothing to do with this. That's why there was a special prosecutor appointed.
Okay.
I am just as critical with Merrick Garland sitting on this as long as he did.
Okay.
But when he appointed a special prosecutor, he moved lickety-split to do what he needs to do. The person who is stalling all of the litigation now is not the prosecutor.
Okay.
It's Mr. Trump who wants to get this into
all right. I need to get
2025.
Yeah, I want to get to. Oh, sorry, I want to get to Bilka and Brill. I just want to get into some of the politics of all of this. There's a New York Times Siena College poll which was published not so long ago, and it shows that Trump and Biden are in a dead heat right now at this stage for the 2020 presidential race. I mean, if we look at this, despite all those indictments, it seems the voting public at this stage is not buying this. And we've also heard today that President Biden's approval rating has dropped from 41 to 37. There's a huge disconnect here. How do you explain that?
Even most Democrats do not want Joe Biden to be their nominee again by most every poll that we've seen. They want a new, younger, fresh face. So I've said it to you before, Anand, off air, and I've said it on your show. I do not believe the American people will get the grudge rematch we're looking at for 2024 right now by the time we are in the midst of both presidential preference primaries. I believe the legal troubles that both Joe Biden and Donald Trump are facing, as well as other issues, will cause someone, and I can't tell you who on either side, to emerge as Republicans and Democrats actually start going into ballot boxes to cast their votes and realizing if you're a Trump supporter, he's not electable in a general election. And if you're a Joe Biden supporter, sometimes he can't complete a sentence even with a teleprompter in front of him. So they will start examining other choices. I do not believe we will see these two men as ultimately the nominees on the Republican and Democratic side in 2024.
Joel, Rubin, I know you talked about this earlier on, but whether we like it or not, Hunter Biden is going to be part of this debate in the run-up to the 2024 election. Now, one of the things that President Biden has said several times was that his son, Hunter, did nothing wrong. Yet the younger Biden has now admitted that he did break the law. So what is Biden talking about when he said his son did nothing wrong?
You know, frankly, this Hunter Biden situation is not about Hunter Biden. What it's about is about trying to connect him to Joe Biden in a vain attempt to try to claim that the president is somehow or has been corrupted, which of course is not accurate. In fact, Hunter Biden's business partner said so in testimony to the House Oversight Committee earlier this week, that the Republicans are really having a hard time talking their way out of. So that's what this is about. And Hunter Biden is a private citizen.
Okay.
And the Republicans are going after him because they want to get the big target, rather than recognizing that this is just a tired old smear tactic that's been used time and
Joel, I'm
again.
going to stop you right there because I do have another question. We are running out of time and I want to get to it. And that is a Washington Post report that former President Barack Obama has expressed his concerns over the strength of the Trump candidacy. Trump, the former president, is reported to have said is a far more formidable candidate that Democrats and their media allies believe. What are we to read into this? Is this some kind of a warning from Obama?
Oh, well, he's not the only one. Senator Fetterman of my home city of Pittsburgh also said the same about Pennsylvania. Without a doubt, Donald Trump has strength in this country. We see it. He has strength in the Republican Party. He's clobbering the field. So no Democrat, and Joe Biden, of course, being the leading Democrat in the party, should take, nor will they take this election for granted. And I think President Obama just making that point means that Democrats, we understand this is existential for the future of the American Republic, of our democracy. Electing Donald Trump will, in certain ways, if not definitively, end the American democratic experiment.
Okay, Adolfo, I've got 30 seconds. I want you to address this. How much of a turning point is this for the United States? What kind of precedent does it set? I mean, if the Republicans are in charge of the Department of Justice as well as the FBI, are we going to see the shoe on the other foot?
Well, it's going to be the same thing that they're doing. That's why we've crossed the Rubicon to become a banana republic. I know we have limited time. A couple of things. The reason President Trump is so strong is because the American people see the weaponization, and it's not limited to the Republicans. Lastly, on this is, let me be clear. This is a special counsel. Since the professor didn't make this clear, not an independent counsel. He's taking his direction from the Justice Department and from the Biden White House. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it at that. We have run out of time. Thank you to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C.